Dun, 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 dun.
And now, with the arrival, the official arrival, and first real look at this series in regard to the teaser that has been released from the Super Bowl for Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power, us Lord of the Rings fans can perhaps sleep easier at night. Or it could be the polar opposite and we could be having a lot of nightmares. We'll see. Time will tell. Again, this has been a real toss-up with this show. And there hasn't been much, in terms of certifiable proof as to how well it'll fare. It's more conjecture at this point. But as I've been saying, I'm happy to entertain at least a look on it, and I hope that it's good, as I imagine most do. Now, as I've also stated previously, I happen to be a Lord of the Rings fan. I love... Now, although I have to say, and I've said this previously, especially with this series and in context to other Lord of the Rings products, my journey into the Lord of the Rings is perhaps very different from most, because I didn't start with the books. I didn't, in fact, actually start with the movies. I started with the video games, notably the Lego Lord of the Rings one. I loved that game so much as a kid that I was like, I want to watch the films, and I finally did, and that was my second entrance. Actually, earlier than that, I had read The Hobbit for grade school. So I guess that was my first entrance, technically. But in terms of, the media presentations. But I still, at this point, have not... taken many of the steps others have in regard to having a deeper understanding of Tolkien, notably because I haven't read the books yet. I'm in the process of working on it, though. I'm actually rereading The Hobbit as we speak. And then I'm going to move on to Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion to get a thorough understanding for the lore. Not just because I want to call myself, a Tolkien fan, and the fact that I've done the work to assume such a title. At least that would be suspected of me, that I've read the lore if I'm going to call myself that. But also so I can judge this series fairly and adequately. Because a lot has been said, and I'll, just before going even into this is a space for, as far as I'm concerned, any point of view. You might be an absolute fan of this show. Again, I think the trailer's going to solidify my perspective, but you might be an absolute fan of this, you might not. I welcome every perspective in the comments down below, and don't worry, I'm not going to chase anybody off as maybe some others are doing, notably within the press space. But anyway... I hope that this show is good. I really do, because, I'm excited with the idea of a major $1 million fantasy production. As well, one from Amazon, it could be quite good. I mean, there's all the means in the world for this to be good, right? And we certainly had teases of that. You think of The Lord of the Rings and the films, which are such prestigious stories. You think maybe some of the other additions have been made. For example, the Middle-earth games. Those are still so much fun. Those are very much... I mean, granted, I understand they take some liberties, but... with the story, notably like the Nazgul stuff, but, I kind of liked it. But they were very much Lord of the Rings in spirit. It felt that way. And I hope that this is, even though, again, I believe it's dated much earlier than the stories as depicted by Peter Jackson and written, of course, originally by Tolkien. I hope it stays true to the essence, right? That it respects the stories as laid before and the official lore with Lord of the Rings. I hope it doesn't stray too far. The Vanity Fair article that came out, I perused it. And, I will say definitely it's very pretty in presentation. But there are already some concerns. I noted a few. Well, thankfully, I will say this. Apparently, the series is not... There is still a distinction between this and Game of Thrones. There won't be, as the rumors were saying, maybe some press outlets were noting, some more adult content that is better related to the Game of Thrones franchise than it is this. From what I've heard, that's not going to be an issue here. I'm very grateful for that. It feels much more approachable in that regard for me. As somebody who doesn't prefer that content. I prefer my content to be, it's clean, especially in those areas. Because Game of Thrones, from my understanding, was excessive there. But there are still some concerns. I hope it's good. And again, you think about it, the budget spent, some of the reverence of what was expressed from, the filmmakers and the showrunners talking about their perspective with, Tolkien and their experiences filming. But, I just noted a couple inconsistencies. There's, for example, and by the way, this is in no way to discredit or be disrespectful to any of the actors. I'm sure they're thrilled to be on a Lord of the Rings production, and for them, this is a job. I'm not going to criticize them at all with this. But I did note that they advertised one of the characters is going to be like this dwarf in royalty, and according to the books, and I didn't know this because again, I didn't have a thorough understanding. Right, I don't have that base. But the dwarf women have beards, right? Because they're sort of indecipherable from the male dwarves. Maybe, I'm maybe there's a distinction here because she's royalty. I don't know. But it's a point that I recognize where, well, that doesn't really, have much cohesion to what was written already. And then there was a line earlier on, too. Just, again, a couple things that I picked out. There was a line early in the piece that said, okay, so in terms of the philosophy, the driving question behind the production, McKay adds, Patrick McKay, one of the showrunners, was this: can we come up with a novel Tolkien never wrote and do it as the mega event series that could only happen now? Now, when he says technically the novel Tolkien never wrote, this is based on a bunch of appendices, from my understanding, and like 150 pages of extensions with Lord of the Rings that aren't specific to a book publication, but which is fine. But what do you mean by can only happen now? I would prefer a little more clarification there. Because on the one hand, if you mean like, well, in terms of today's filming technology and what we can do these days within the cinematic space, that would be fine. I'd see no issue with that. Or do you mean could only happen now in regard to extrinsic sensibilities that could be playing a factor here, which has been assumed with Lord of the Rings based on, well, with the Rings of Power specifically, based on what I've seen on internet rumblings. I hope it's a case of the former. Now, again, I'm going to try to be very open-minded going into this, but I do have to be honest in acknowledging my concerns. Because, granted, as I said previously as well, in spirit, I'm very much this. But I'm reluctant to apply the phrase Tolkien purist to me, because, again, it implies that I have some level of understanding and familiarity with the fundamentals of the lore. And I haven't read the books, right? I've only watched the films and the Hobbit movies, of course, and I'm just tapping into the reading. So I don't have the most thorough understanding. But in spirit, I would more than appreciate this series to reflect the spirit of Tolkien in the world of Middle-earth as he envisioned it and he wrote it. I think that would only be fair, especially since the series is going to be debuting on the anniversary of his death. So it better be good. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and watch this first, and we'll talk about it more in my the official teaser trailer. We'll talk about it more in my condensed review segment when I was watching the video together. And like I said, I'm going to try to judge this very fairly, and I welcome any perspectives down below, right? And if you're somebody that happens to, want to express concern, don't be afraid to say so, because I'm not going to be number one. But I have seen some of the mudslinging already. To be honest, it's just stupid. It's always the jump these days, but fans are wanting an authentic, especially the people I would imagine, again, are sincere Tolkien purists or maybe even Tolkien scholars. They want a project that reflects the work as originally articulated. And they're not wrong for saying that. And I've heard from many of them, in fact, who have expressed, they want nothing more than to love this show, right? As much as I do. But that doesn't mean necessarily a lot of, internet chatter is going that direction, because there's certainly a bit of a lack of respectability. I've seen the press being rather antagonistic. I've already seen some people involved in the movie journalist space. I've seen people involved with the show. I've seen, the OneRing.net is its own problem. And granted, more or less, I've just watched that situation unfold for the last couple months from a backseat perspective, but they're really sending themselves off into oblivion in terms of wanting to be access media wannabes. I mean, if there's anything that this trailer did prove, or the arrival of it, I should say, for actuality, well, we know why maybe they were going so hard after fans, and very much unreasonably so, because they got to be featured on a live stream with Amazon. Interesting. Very interesting. Anyway, just figured I'd acknowledge that. If you're afraid of raising concerns here that, and I would please, if you disagree with someone's perspective, please be hospitable about it down below in the comment section. I don't want to deal with, animus directed towards other people that might express concerns as much as I would be. So let's be fair to one another as we talk, or as we express our concerns, and not necessarily go after the path of others like the OneRing.net. Don't use them as a role model for this. They're basically, the new Lucasfilm at this point. All right, without further ado, let's get a first look at this trailer, and hopefully I'll be able to judge it fairly. Without further ado, here we go. Let's take a look at this.
Haven't you ever wondered what else is out there?
It looks like Lord of the Rings in presentation.
This world.
And like I saw with the photos in the Vanity Fair article, it's very luminous.
I can feel it.
Is that a fawn? That's really pretty. Well, again, looks are great, and you've certainly spent the money to make a beautiful looking show. But is it divorced in substance? that's very much a tease. I was expecting it something a little bit longer, to be honest with you. It's definitely giving you the core impressions of the Lord of the Rings world. And again, like I said, presentation-wise, it looks very much in line with the films. It looks like a Lord of the Rings project. Not as much... Well, they've certainly spent the money in regard to the environment. By the way, this photo with these... I don't know what these two individuals or creatures, I guess, maybe happen to be, but these moose antler folk. I did see in the Vanity article, or Vanity Fair article, that J.A. Bayona is involved with this, and I do like him quite a bit as a director. Again, I love Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, largely because, again, of the horror aesthetics, which I believe he's pretty well known for. He did a really good job there, so I'm excited to see his work. In terms of how involved he is with the show. But I would imagine that, again, well, it'll play to other extremes, but fundamentally that will speak to the aesthetics. Because that was very present within Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom in his work. Presentation-wise, it had that horror feel. This is a very different story in parts, but I imagine he's going to do a good job from that angle. Presentation-wise, it looks like Lord of the Rings. It has the same type of feel with the energy of the action sequences, the naturalistic imagery. Middle-earth feels, quite expansive here as it did within Lord of the Rings, the films, and maybe even if you read the books, that's the feeling you got as well. In fact, I'm assuming Elven Kingdom looks pretty much like it was pulled out of the Lord of the Rings films. I hope this isn't like another West Side Story where it looks like the story that's based on in substance, but when you boil it down, it's a story that you find isn't as congruent or symmetrical. Again, at this point, from a first impression, it looks like Lord of the Rings. But I think we need to see a little more in regarding to giving a more elaborate perspective. But at least on look, Amazon's obviously spent a lot of money. What is it, like $465 million they spent for this? For the first season? Like, it's a crazy amount of money. It has that feeling to me. But I'm going to be open. I will. Until we get to see more. I would have preferred something a little longer here, though, to be honest with you. Maybe go into maybe like a more story-centered trailer. I mean, if this is very much like a tease, but rather short, in my opinion. What are your guys' thoughts with The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power? I mean, I don't know. Again, this is a series that could do very well, or it could crash and burn. Time will tell. And I'm sure, fans like me, maybe I won't have as much to say compared to other people who are more knowledgeable on the foundations of the story, but I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about it going forward. But I welcome you to share your perspectives and thoughts down below in the comment section. Don't forget all the good stuff. And remember, please be civil to one another. Don't forget all the good stuff with liking, subscribing, and sharing, and that bell until we get to watch more from Lord of the Rings in the future, because of course I will. I want to judge it fairly, and until then, I've said presentation-wise, it looks like Tolkien's work and the Peter Jackson movies, even though, again, as I saw with the Vanity Fair article, maybe they were departing that because he's not intrinsically involved here, but at least in spirit, it has that nature to it. I'm concerned about the substance here and where it goes, but it's very much a time will tell situation. Until we get to watch more from Lord of the Rings and get a better feeling for how to accurately judge it, I will see you guys at a point that happens to be. But for now, thanks for watching this video. I love you guys. Don't forget to love yourselves, your fellow man. God bless and peace.